Good afternoon. This is RJ with the IWS podcast, and I have Franklin this afternoon. We're
Good
trying to
afternoon.
have a follow up conversation to a similar talk we were having a few weeks ago, and we're going to kind of continue with where we left off, if that's okay, Franklin.
Yeah.
All right. So, first of all, welcome. The topic for today and where I want to piggyback on is, or where we're going to start actually, is discussing the importance of fathers and sons in that relationship. When we've talked previously, you shared a little bit about your experience growing up with your dad, and a lot of my clinical experience in mental health, and with a lot of the male clients I have, I find that that's an area of concern pretty much in everybody's situation, where most people don't seem to have a quite a favorable viewpoint of their dads and the way that they're able to express themselves with them. And so I wanted to kind of start there and see, how would you characterize your relationship with your father as it stands today?
Um, I would say there's no real depth to like our relationship. Um, yeah. Uh, I don't know what else to say.
I mean, do you feel like if you were in like a difficult circumstance or a challenging situation that you would reach out to try to get any type of assistance, or would you just try to get through it on your own?
It depends how like if, I don't feel like I can speak to my dad for everything.
Okay.
You know. Um, Most things I wouldn't come to my dad for. Like if I'm struggling with um, school or like even personal things like
Hmm.
relationships, stuff like that. No.
Okay.
Um, if it's a life or death matter, I might consider.
I mean, that sounds a little extreme. I mean, do you care to elaborate? What kind of things qualify for you? You say, okay, this is what I would open up to him about. These are things maybe I would inquire with him and get his perspective. Where would you go to him for?
Honestly, it's pretty far. Point is like for most things, I wouldn't like if I got in trouble. Okay,
Hmm.
and I could be in serious. Like most like let's say if I go in trouble with the law or something, I
Sure.
don't know, and I was, um, yeah, or if something happened, I don't know,
Like so, basically, like personal safety type stuff.
yeah, and also like money wise, probably,
Okay. So
yeah,
very very typical relationship then with dad. Financial
yeah,
stability, protecting me.
pretty much.
So not too extensive beyond that is what
No,
you're
no, no,
saying essentially.
yeah,
Okay. And again, I don't think that that's alarming or particularly surprising for me. A lot of the work that I do in my clinical practice and the people that I talk to, that's pretty standard. If it's not situations like that you're asking for those very specific type scenarios for help, it's I would just kind of figure it out by myself, and I don't think I would really want to ask for any assistance. Um, which to me, as a therapist, is more indicative of that lack of relationship. That takes years to cultivate, even the lack of one. And I always find that surprising because it seems so normal to many of us, and yet I still find it very surprising that it is normal, because I would hope that it wouldn't be. I would hope the normal would be is that we would go to them just like we would go to our mom, for those of us that have moms in our lives, for assistance for relatively anything. So the fact that we're just like, yeah, dad's good for helping me out when I'm in a jam and providing me financial support, it feels kind of narrow in scope. But at
yeah.
the same time, that's kind of how men are seen in a lot of ways, as financial providers and protectors, not really anything else. Is that a fair way to sort of characterize how you see your relationship with your dad right now?
Yeah, for sure. That pretty much sums it up. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. So that brings me to my next point then, and it's thinking about how we learn to express ourselves emotionally, particularly those of us that are men, and starting off obviously when we're young men under our fathers and our mothers or whoever raised us in the house. Do you think that it would be important for you to have had your dad be more open to expressing himself emotionally when you were a young child?
Um, yeah, as in for sure, I feel like a lot of characters we adopt from is from our childhood,
Hmm.
and for me that's exactly how it was, and the way I deal with like people and the way I dealt with people,
Yeah,
because I feel like I'm slowly changing. Um, was very similar, if without knowing, was very similar to how my dad, dealt with people and relationships and
yeah,
expressing himself. I'm still working on like being able to express myself and stuff.
sure,
And he never did express, how he felt until it got so much that he just lashed out on everyone, which was
sure.
pretty much how I used to be.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it's interesting you say it in that way. I usually kind of make that point too, when I'm in a session with somebody. We learn through observation.
yeah,
Sometimes we're not being explicitly told, "Hey, go do this." But I'm learning based on what I'm seeing you do, and that becomes normal to me. So if I
hmm,
see that you typically don't really open up about how you're feeling, if you're my dad and me being a son, I'm usually going to identify more with my father. Then it's going to make me feel like, well, then I guess I'm not supposed to either. And then
yeah,
if in our relationship we don't talk about that kind of stuff, or you as my father don't ask me how I feel about any of these things, then again, you're sending me the signal it's not important to talk about how you feel.
yeah,
And I find that over time, that's where we get to the situation like you described your dad did, and you do similarly right now, but you're working on it. Is we bottle everything up, we compartmentalize everything, and then we tend to explode or erupt on people when we sort of hit our breaking point.
yeah.
And I hope you would agree with me, because this is obviously the work that I do, that that's not a healthy way to communicate.
No, it's not.
It's actually the absence of communication. But unfortunately, because it's so normal to us, we think that that's the way it is supposed to be, or that's just a part of our personality, that I'm just not a talker. I just don't
Yeah,
express myself. And I reject that notion. Because if we really think that that's true and we believe that way, then that means that at any one particular moment, somebody is going to get the wrath that we have pent up inside because we
yeah,
don't ever let it out in a healthy fashion, like on a more regular and consistent basis, if you get what I mean.
yeah,
So, and I'm glad that you said that you're working on it. I encourage all of us, particularly men and men of color, to be willing to discuss those types of challenges, because it starts with us. And the younger we start working on that, we don't have to have those challenges as we get older in life. And particularly if we end up having children of our own and then end up repeating the cycle and sort of dooming them to have some of the same challenges that we did.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So I agree. And I hope that that sort of encourages you to continue with that work and this process that you're on in your own emotional journey. But I want to go back to the point about the relationship and not having that with dad. When we don't get to see that and we don't get to have those types of vulnerable conversations with our parents, it makes it much more difficult, as you mentioned in the beginning, about when you have romantic relationships, friendships with others, even colleagues and peers. When people ask you questions, it's easier to shy away, to avoid, to deny, and just run, because I don't feel very comfortable having these types of discussions. So I'm used to just kind of keeping it all to myself and again, bottling it all up. But that's not going to help me in the long run, right? It's going to end
No.
up causing me more damage in the long run. So can you elaborate a little further on where you were starting to describe some of the issues you've had because you've learned to pin up all of your emotions and then sort of let them out in a more aggressive fashion?
So um Majorly, when a few years ago, like 3 years ago or so, when I got into a serious relationship,
Hmm.
I learned that I learned very quickly that that wasn't how things should be done, you know,
Yeah.
and especially if you're trying to get someone to understand how you feel.
Hmm.
Um, mm, yeah, it's not helpful,
Yeah.
really. It's much better to just say how you feel then and there than to just let things pile up, and then
Yeah.
at the end you let the person know, like, hey, look, I'm you know, this is everything that you've been doing for the past 4 months that's pissing me off.
Right. Probably not the best way for it to be received well.
No.
Kind of going down a laundry list. This,
Yeah.
this, 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 and this. And on May 1st, 2019, you did that, and that really made me upset.
Yeah, so
Probably not the best way.
yeah, just letting the person know, like, hey, I really don't like that, or
Yeah.
then and there, you know and then talking about it in a way that's not really trying to show, because what I grew up around was
Hmm.
a lot was like men, or yeah, my dad, men trying to show like their strength when they're like annoyed, like their dominance, I guess. Maybe that's their way of
Yeah.
like yelling and just like saying, I don't like this or whatever, but actually trying to have a conversation
Hmm.
and actually trying to understand, the other person as well, not
Yeah.
just what you're trying to, not just the fact that you're not happy with something, but trying to understand and seeing what can be done to
Yeah.
help whatever is going on. Yeah,
100%, man. No, I agree with you. And one thing you said there that I think is important to note is you mentioned in trying to share is that also trying to listen and then understand.
yeah,
And of course, I subscribe to that. I mean, it's difficult because when you're feeling emotional, it's very natural to have that personal bias, sort of blind us, where
yeah,
I really only think about and care about how I see things right now. The hard thing is to try to learn how to step beside myself and actually try to put myself in your shoes. What does he think? What does she think? How does he feel? How does she feel? And what's interesting, what you're describing is I would say it still boils down to those initial interactions when we're coming up, when we're growing up. If
yeah,
you are in a healthy environment with your mother, your father, again, or whoever raises you, and you are encouraged to speak openly, right, about whatever it is that you feel, it's fundamentally easier when we get into romantic relationships later on in life to then be open and expressive and honest. But a lot of us, particularly those of us from backgrounds like myself or like you, we don't have those types of experiences always growing up. So it makes it a bit more challenging to then want to desire to actually open up because you haven't necessarily felt or seen the benefit yet. It's just like, oh, that's going to make me uncomfortable. Why would I want to do that? You know, maybe I'll just keep that to myself.
yeah,
And I'm simply trying to help encourage us, both from personal reasons of what I've experienced in my life growing up, but also professionally with the people that I've worked with, is just saying that it's healthier for us to be willing to share those experiences with our partners, our children, our family members, whoever it is that we might be having an issue with. Because in the long run, we're going to be able to, as you said, not let issues pile up and build up where we end up having tense or hostile relationships with folks. Or do we just straight up avoid them because you're like, I don't need to deal with you because I have 5 problems with you, but I'm not willing to talk to you about it. So we're never going to get resolution on it. And I don't want to encourage that. So I appreciate you for putting that out there because I think it's important for both people like me and you and anybody else that might listen to this and understand that it's normal that a lot of us come from these backgrounds and understand that because of the way that a lot of us start off life and the way that we grow up, it impacts so many other parts of our life as we get older, particularly relationships, the romantic kind, because I'm sure you know well now, as I do,
Yeah.
if you are a heterosexual male and you like women, women want to talk about their feelings. They're always taught that it's okay to express themselves. And it's us that have the challenge, not because we're not emotional creatures, but because we're taught to not feel okay about expressing it. So
Yeah.
that's why that's such a big topic for me. And I appreciate you for, opening up and sharing a little bit about that. And continuing with that theme, because we're talking about the importance of expressing ourselves. I wanted to, for the people who might identify with you being a Nigerian man, do you think there's any sort of subcultural element or layer perhaps that might make it even more challenging for brothers like yourself or sisters like, from your background to open up or to share how they're feeling at any particular moment?
So for men, um it's the same as it's pretty similar. You'll be surprised, but it's pretty similar to like growing up, I suppose, anywhere
Mhm.
and being a man.
Sure.
There's the typical when from a very young age, you're always told whenever you feel a certain way or you're always told to suck it up. You're a man, be a man,
Mm, there you
stuff
go.
like this. And you'd be surprised, like even my mom, does this as well.
Okay. Okay.
And only till recently, actually, when I told her, that's not okay, she still did this.
Yeah.
Like when I would actually be having a terrible day and I would like call her or something, or when we're talking and I'm just like, hey mom, like, you know maybe college isn't for me or something, I just don't like
Mm,
this. And then she'll be like, reply like something like, be a man. And I feel like those kinds of things really discourage you from sharing or being open. Especially like, okay, it's my mom, we're kind of close. i'm
hmm.
i'm I'm kind of fine with her saying things like that because we're close. I know she wants me to express myself, and
Right.
either way, but her saying that now, I don't know if I can like share with like, it's gonna feel some type of way if I'm like sharing with like, you know you know other people who are not as close, who I don't have that close,
Right.
or even like my dad, because I don't want him to see me as, weak or something. I don't know.
No, listen, you hit some amazing points there that we got to deconstruct because number one, and I never am not amazed by this. It seems like no matter where you're from in the world, because I've had obviously a lot of conversations with a lot of folks from different parts in the world. If you're a man, there's a certain parts of our gender roles or norms, if you will, that is expected behavior. And like what you just said, man, I couldn't agree with you more because I heard the same things growing up, and I think there's at least like a 10-year age gap between me and you. Um, be a man, don't cry, suck it up, don't be a girl. All these phrases that are sort of off the cuff comments that I've heard. I don't know about you. I've heard teachers make them, family members make them, siblings make them, and of course friends, because that's just sort of the expectation. A man, from my understanding, from what I've learned, not what I agree with, but what I learned, is you don't cry, you don't show weakness, aka vulnerability, you don't open up, you don't ask for help, you just tough it through everything.
Yeah.
And I also find it interesting, not amazing, but interesting. You even noted your mom. And I've had mothers who have come to me to get counseling for their sons. And I've had to challenge them because that's some of the first things that they have said to me. He doesn't have a right to be depressed. I was like, ma'am, what do you mean he doesn't have a right? He's a human being. He might not experience things the way that you do. I understood where she was coming from, what she was trying to say. I don't understand why you're depressed because I take care of all the responsibilities. What are you stressing about? That's a healthier way to maybe say that. But to simply like invalidate or minimize you and say, you don't have the right to be depressed. You don't have the right to be anxious. What do you have to worry about? That's really not fair. That's
Yeah.
basically saying until you're an adult and you fully support yourself, you're not allowed to have an emotion, which I thoroughly disagree with. So, but what's interesting, going back to the point about the mom, is that even women contribute to this. And I don't even think they're doing it maliciously or like trying to hurt us, but they're also part of the problem. Those that make those kind of comments and make those statements towards us, because they're essentially telling us the same thing. Don't open up, don't express yourself, definitely don't ask me for help, because I don't want to see you weak. I want to see you be strong. You need to be a strong man. And before I invite you to comment back on this, I want to make this last point. What's interesting about that comment is the same women in a lot of cases that want us to behave in that sort of fashion, traditional alpha protector type male. In many cases I've seen can be the same ones that complain that we don't express ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a catch 22. Because if you go on the traditional way of what it means to be a man, you're not supposed to open up. You're kind of supposed to be seen and not heard. That's what we tell the kids when you're young. But women don't want that. Usually they want to talk about that. And that's the right thing to do. That's the healthy thing to do. But we all have to create this nice, warm, inviting environment to actually encourage us, because it is difficult and foreign for so many of us to feel comfortable to do that. So I wanted to allow you to sort of elaborate back on that point you were talking about with your mom. Like, how does that make you feel when she makes those kind of statements to you, even though you know she wants you to be more open?
As in, sometimes it's annoying. I wouldn't lie.
Hmm.
Sometimes I just want to hang up and just be like, well, I guess I'll deal with this by myself.
Right, right.
you know. But like I said, I think she's learned not to be doing that. She has done it for a while, but
Okay.
it's as close as a few months ago, honestly. Um, but it was,
Good to hear.
yeah.
Did,
Um,
did, Real quick, did you have to share that with her?
yeah,
That hurt you and that bothered you? Is that what helped her to start to have that realization?
yeah. Then she also, it got to a point that one time I was really really like down,
Hmm.
and I was trying to like, because okay, I haven't really spent that much time with my family compared to like most people, because I left home at a very young age
Yeah.
to go to boarding school. Um,
How old were you?
11. My dad
Wow.
decided, just randomly decided, he was just like, your mom's spoiling you too much. You know,
Wow.
I'm gonna,
I
I'm
mean, listen,
gonna.
I gotta say real quick, my son turns 11 in a month, man. That's, yeah, I couldn't imagine sending him away already. That's
Yeah.
that's pretty young.
So like, I already had to like deal with a ton of stuff by myself
Hmm.
without them there, and so she sort of said that when I opened up to her and say that and said, you can't say that, like, I'm actually really struggling here.
Yeah.
She saw that I was actually pretty. She realized what she like did. She was
Hmm.
just like telling me like, I know. Then she brought up the fact that I haven't been at home for that long. That she's really worried about me. Like, she's more worried about me than my sister, because
Mm.
she's not sure like what that did to me mentally and everything. I was
Yeah.
kind of more relieved, because I felt like she was a little bit aware of of how um of of how like unstable I was, men
Hmm.
unstable I am mentally,
Yeah.
because of like the fact that I haven't really been grounded, in one place, or in one environment
Understood.
for enough time. So yeah, that was really helpful. Yeah.
Being sort of heard in that way
Mhm.
by mom.
Yeah, yeah.
You see
And
that, I'm gonna say real quick, I'm sure that's played a role on you as well, like you said, not being able to kind of have that traditional upbringing where you're in the home for so long because you left home very young to go to the boarding school.
mhm. Yeah. And also the fact that she was aware of that made me feel a little bit better, because in my head, I always felt alone, and I
Yeah.
always somewhat feel alone. Like, nobody. There's nobody to like go to like explain what the feelings I have
Yeah.
sometimes. You know, and
Oh,
her being aware of it just not knows. It,
100%.
yeah,
100%, man. And I appreciate you even saying that part, not that this is a shameless plug, but to me that's almost like that's a perfect reason to go seek out therapy then.
yeah, yeah. I
For,
do.
for most people. I mean, I know you've mentioned that you have had that experience and that you're working on that too. But for those that haven't yet,
Hmm.
but have heard what you said, I think that's so appropriate of a response. I haven't always felt grounded, or I'm typically feeling very isolated, very lonely, and not everybody understands how I feel or what I think about. To me, that's a perfect scenario to get that unbiased, non-judgmental perspective where you're going to get supported and somebody's going to help you sort of learn to formulate your thoughts and your opinions and your experiences in a helpful and constructive way where we can share those with those that we care about, whether that be mom, dad, siblings, friends, romantic partners, whoever, children. I think that it's important because that's how we start to reestablish and I would say modify what the norms are. And again, the norms, as we were talking about earlier, traditionally is we shut down, put it in a box, bury it away somewhere, we don't talk about it, and just hope
Yeah,
that everything's going to be okay. And I want to challenge that norm because I don't agree. I think that's wrong. That's why we have so many of the challenges that we have as men and as young men, especially because that's all they've learned.
yeah,
And I refuse, as somebody who's had to go through a lot of those experiences, I refuse to condemn the next generation to have to replay a lot of these same mistakes. I want, and I'm hoping so much that these interactions and these conversations might help some folks to seek out help sooner and recognize that if they're feeling like they are isolated or they are lonely or they don't know how to communicate how they feel well, to go get some help and go talk to somebody, a professional.
yeah. Certainly.
So, anything you want to add on the topic of your experience in therapy so far? Like anything that you've
Well,
recognized relatively quickly? You're like, oh, I didn't realize I was doing this, and maybe I need to work on that more.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Therapy bring. It's always good to have a third opinion that isn't really um, biased. You
Hmm.
know, um, yeah. There's been a few things that's come out.
Yeah.
Um,
Anything you feel comfortable sharing? If not, it's okay. But just ask any like themes or just ideas that you didn't really consider until you went to therapy.
yeah. I realize that I can be very indifferent
Mm,
about people. I don't know why.
okay.
Even people that I think that I'm close to. Because I don't know why. I don't know if it's like me, a way of me protecting myself, or the fact that um because I've had so many close connections with people, and then I moved to another place, and it's like, so I don't
Okay.
know.
That if I can take a stab at that real quick. Not that this is a therapy session, but just we're just sharing and talking.
Yeah,
I would say that sounds like, and it totally makes sense, a good protective measure to not get too attached to folks because if I have to leave again soon, then it's going to be really painful for me to have to leave and start over. So even though if I'm saying I'm close to people, I don't want to get too close because I don't want to have to feel that pain every time I have to leave. So let me just keep a healthy amount of distance, even with those that I'm saying I'm the closest with. So that way I don't have to go through that experience over and over again. Not
yeah.
saying that that is what you're doing, but if any part of that is accurate, it would totally make sense.
I think that makes sense. I feel like that's most likely what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, the good thing is, like I tell all my clients and people that that I know, most behaviors, if not all behaviors, are learned. We're not hardwired to like be certain kinds of ways most of the time, barring actual physiological or biological condition that makes us behave a certain kind of way. Most behaviors are learned. So it means we can unlearn them, we can modify them and change them. So if I find, like you were saying, if I find that I'm very distant with people because I haven't been able to be really grounded in my life because I felt like I've frequently had to go and change environments and change situations. So I don't want to have to like hurt over and over again. I can learn that when I'm in my new environment, maybe I will work hard at establishing those relationships, but more importantly, maintaining those connections, even if I have to move. So it doesn't have to feel like I'm sacrificing those relationships every time I physically leave like a region or a part of the world. That's just like, food for thought, that sometimes we
Yeah.
can we can take that approach, so then we don't have to feel like, well, I need to be more guarded and then I don't want to open up because if I open up, then I'm going to get hurt. Yes, that's true. But that's also what helps us to feel alive as humans, being socially connected beings, meaning we're going to
Yeah.
communicate. We don't, you want to typically want to describe our connection to others as indifference because it means that we kind of like take it or leave it. Like it doesn't really bother me. And I think most people, we want to feel that deeper connection with some people. I'm not saying with everybody,
Yeah.
but with like your real friends or family, what have you. So it makes sense where it could stem from, is my point. And the beautiful part about what you're saying is some of this insight and what you're learning about yourself is because of the benefit of going to therapy.
Yeah.
So again, I'm always a huge proponent of that. Um, especially starting younger. But then as we were talking about earlier, from the cultural lens, man, like it's just as black and brown people, especially I'll say in the United States, but I want to say for a lot of us globally, these are just common practices to just really keep things to self and not really open up, not really share. And I really just want to push back and try to challenge our idea of what that means because I feel like it's so destructive for us in the long term.
Yeah.
We may not see it immediately, but in the long term, when you got to have these real relationships with people, then we don't know how to communicate, man. It causes so much chaos that could be
Yeah.
avoided.
Yeah. It does. It does.
So I I appreciate you for sharing that insight, and I'm hoping that moving forward, there's an opportunity for folks to really look in the mirror and have that moment of maybe self-reflection and really consider, how do I communicate? Do I take the opportunity to really completely formulate my thoughts and my opinions and then thoughtfully share them with somebody, whether I'm upset with them, happy with them, or just wanting to be open with them? And perhaps if I don't, why don't I do that? Have I come to the conclusion of why I'm not willing to open up? We're talking about today, a lot of it starting from the way we grow up. And for those of us that are men, our relationships with our fathers, because of the intimate nature of what that relationship can do. It's our um, sort of our launch pad of our emotional teaching. If we have a good foundation growing up and we have that good relationship with father and son, even mother and son, we're going to be very grounded to engage with anybody else. But if I don't have those relationships, I might second guess every type of relationship and all types of communication with them because I didn't have it with the two people that brought me into this world. So why would I assume that I'm going to have it with people who are just meeting me now?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it leads to one to ask these questions. And so I challenge anybody who is watching this or who is listening to this and really consider, are they doing the best that they can to effectively communicate how they feel and what they think to the people that they care about the most? And if they're not, then we should be doing our own work so that we can get better at it. So we can prevent, as much as we can, additional pain and heartache down the road. That would be my selfish hope and wish for anybody that listens, watches this, or gets the privilege to talk to somebody like you and learn a bit about your background. You know, Anything you think you want to add to that particular topic or go a little deeper?
Uh, no, I think you summed up everything. One thing is like I one of my biggest fears has been like being like my father.
Mm,
And the truth is, I always thought I was nothing like him,
yeah.
but it wasn't until but the truth is like, if it's not your choice whether you're nothing like him or not,
Right.
I realized that I was actually very, very, very similar,
Mm-hmm.
and I am sort of very similar, but you can change that by going to therapy
Yes,
and
sir.
by getting external help, because you only know what you've learned and what you have, but like talking to other people
Mm-hmm.
and getting external opinions, that's one of the best ways to improve, to be different from what
Yeah.
you know. Yeah,
100%, man. And I appreciate you sharing that. I want to I want to piggyback on that now because you're 100% right. I had the same fear. And
yeah,
I have a young son, so when I think about these conversations, I'm thinking about him.
yeah,
And I think about, am I creating an environment where he doesn't want to talk to me? And I'm hoping, myself on the topic to not feed into that sort of generational type curse, like
yeah,
feeding into the same norms. You must behave like I did. So I try to let that fear motivate me, both in my time that I've spent in therapy and will go again if I feel like I need to continue working on any of these concerns, but also because of the people that I work with and I get to talk to. Those are things that keep me grounded, where I try to ask myself often, because as you said, you are 100% right. That's why I believe so much in the nurturing part of our environment. If I am the product of that environment, and whatever emotions and behaviors I typically display is based on the summary of what I experienced growing up. So if I'm very distant, very disconnected, I don't communicate with folks well, it's probably because in my environment growing up, that's how it was. So I'm simply mirroring back what I experienced when I was growing up. So I take what you said and use that as fuel to keep me humble and keep me focused, to ask myself these questions. Am I being overly punitive, like doing too much punishment, too much consequences? Am I being very aggressive and hostile with my language? Am I creating a space for my child to open up to me and speak honestly without fear of being in trouble? Right? Because if you're afraid of being in trouble, you're not going to say anything. And
yeah,
so I ask myself those questions often, because as a father and remembering what it was like to be a son in an environment that was very hostile and very oppressive to not speak openly, I really don't want to be that type of person. But as you said, we're learning based on the experience that we had growing up. So it is then, to me, it is our responsibility when we become adults to do something about it.
yeah,
So then you got to go get that perspective. You got to go to therapy. You got to talk to folks and be willing to accept that I didn't get to create and pick where I was born and the family that I was born into. But once I am of age and I can make some decisions for myself, then I need to do so and make myself a priority, so that way I don't have to keep reliving these types of hardships for the rest of my life, you know?
yeah,
So very, very good point there. That's usually a big motivation I find for us, is trying to not be like somebody that raised us.
yeah,
And it can be, in that type of respect, it can kind of be like a fear. Fear can be a good motivator.
yeah,
And in that regard, I share it similarly. And I try to harness it in a way that helps me to make sure that I'm being the best version of myself, not simply operating out of fear, but saying, what am I doing to sort of counterbalance this scale? If this is what I learned, I want to change it now, so that way I'm giving my son the best opportunity to be a very healthy, grounded individual. And you have the unique opportunity now, doing your own work in therapy, to do the same. And if you ever decide to have children one day, I'm sure it will be fundamentally easier for them to have these conversations than it probably was for you with your family.
Yeah.
So, whew, that was a good one.
Hopefully.
That was a good one, man. I like that. Any lasting thoughts before we bring this to a close?
Um. No, I think that pretty much sums up everything I had to say
Okay.
today.
All right, man. Well, either way, Franklin, I really appreciate you for being here, man. I love the conversation. This to me, I'm sure this is going to hit home and resonate with some people, simply because it's so in common, so much in common with, regardless of where so many of us come from, the experiences that we share. And I'm hoping that maybe hearing some of this might encourage some people to, again, look in the mirror and sort of really ask themselves that question of, are they effectively communicating? And if not, why are they not? And being willing to go get that help if they need to. So perhaps this might be another conversation. Maybe we'll add on to this in the future. But I thank you for being here. And I'm hoping that if anybody appreciated this or got some value from that, to like the video and to maybe use this as a stepping stone to getting their own help. That to me is the end goal at the end of the day. It's not about just the platform, it's about the message and making sure that we're all trying to be the healthiest, most genuine versions of ourselves. So I appreciate you for being here, sir.
My pleasure, RJ.